Hello guys, welcome to Online Web Tutor presented by PHP Solutions team. I am Sanjay. Now inside this video session guys, we are going to learn about complete guide for MySQLi using object-oriented method. In our previous video session, we had seen about using MySQLi functions using the procedural way. So inside this video session, we will discuss about object-oriented way. So if I back to code editor, now inside this, as we have made one file something called object-oriented.php. In the last video, we have made a file something called procedural.php. Inside this file, we have learned and used all the functions, but the functions we have used in the manner of procedural way. But inside this file, we are going to use and let's say that we are going to do the same functionality like insert, update, delete, so on, all the operations, but this time we are going to follow about object oriented approach. So let's say that PHP tag. Now inside this PHP tag, the first way we are going to make our MySQLi connection. So for that, I'm going to browser and open call phpMyAdmin and the root username and password we have. And inside this video, we are going to use the same database called it's not the database, something called learn_coordinator. Now inside this database, we have a table called books, and we are going to make use of this table to our query. So back to editor. Now let's say that we are going to ready to make connection with our database. So it should be connection. Here, let's say connection variable equal to new MySQLi. Inside this, we have to pass our connection details. Now this time, we have used new keyword to create MySQLi connection, and this is known as object oriented. This is an object. Now inside this MySQLi, we have to make our connection details to localhost. Here we have to pass our username, so root, and password we have called root, and finally the next parameter we have to pass our database name. So we are going to use something called learn_coordinator. So copy this and pasting it here. So now if we want to check that connection details is valid or not, it means in the last video we had seen about MySQLi connect error no and MySQLi connect error. These are the two functions basically responsible to check our connection status. So in the same way, we want to check about the connection status inside this object oriented as well. So we have called if, let's say connection, this is our object, and inside this we have called connect underscore error no. Right here inside this if we have connection error, so let's say echo, or let's say print let's say connection error concatenating with, let's say connection, this is our object, and we have called connect underscore error. If I put semicolon here, and finally if we have some error, then we want to exit inside this if block, else, or let's say that we are going to print some message, let's say echo connected successfully. Now if I save all these changes, and also I want to print all the available objects inside this connection object, so save all these changes, back to browser, reload this page. Now as we can see that connected successfully, and this is the MySQLi object returned by connection object. But let's say that if we do some mistake in our connection details, let's say root1, this is not a valid password for this database connection. Again back to browser, reload this page. Now as we can see that connection error, access denied for user root @localhost. Again, if I again set password to a valid password and learn coordinator 1, this is not a valid database. Go here, reload this page. Again we have error called connection error unknown database. Back to editor. Now we have seen that in case of object oriented, these are the approaches actually we need to follow to make our connection details validation. Now we are ready to execute our query. So go here. Let's say that firstly I'm to use or let's select data from our table from table. Now how can we execute the actually fetching data from our table? So for that, let's say that get data equal to connection object, and it has a method something called query. Inside this query we have to pass our query. So let's say select all from, and the table we have something called books. So if I save all these changes, let me check about the table name. Back to browser, and inside this database we have a table called books. If I back to code editor, now let's say that successfully we are getting all the data inside this get data variable. Now we are ready to iterate over all the data. So let's say while loop, inside this let's say row equal to, let's say connection. It's not connection because we have stored all the data inside this get data variable. So copy that, pasting it here. Now we have all the available functions we have seen in the procedural way, something called MySQLi fetch array, MySQLi fetch associative, as well as MySQLi fetch object. Already we have all those methods inside this object oriented as well. So we have something like this: get data, fetch array. This is something like that. Now if I write print r and let's say row, now if I save all these changes, back to browser, reload this page, now as we can see that by using our fetch array we have called id as well as its index, book name as well as its index, book email and its index. So we are getting about the indexes and the key name inside this array format. But we want only the keys should be appeared inside our array. So for that we will use called fetch associative. This is what we have seen inside our previous video. So if we save all these changes, back to browser, reload this page, now as we can see that inside this array format we have only the keys available. Again if I back to browser and let's say that if I change assoc to object, that it will give the same result, but this time we have an object format. This is something like that. Okay, so if we want to get the data, so let's say here echo something called row, and we have called id, and let's say book name equal to row, and we have called book underscore name, and the price we have something called book price equal to row, and inside this we have the key something called book underscore price, and br tag to separate our output lines. Now inside in the front I am to attach with the id. So if I save all these changes, back to browser, reload this page, now as we can see that we have 3 books inside our table, something called id1, 3 and the 4. If I make some zoom, this is something like that. This is the object-oriented approach we have followed to execute and get all the data from our database table. Now let's say that we are going to execute about the insert query. So how can we execute that? So if I make comment of this line, comment this line, also comment and comment that. Now at the starting we are going to execute about, let's say, insert data. So I'm going to write insert query. So insert underscore query, let's say that insert into table name we have called books, and the column something we want to be inserted called book name, something we have called book underscore email, and we have called book underscore price, and the values we are going to insert something let's say inside this, and it should be something, let's say Laravel tutorial. And here the book email I want to specify, let's say owt@gmail.com, and let's say price, it should be, let's say 2000. Now this is the insert query actually I have written. Now we are going to execute and insert the data to our database table. So how can we make use of that? So here let's say that if connection object, and we have something called query, and inside this I'm to pass this variable insert query, and after insertion it will return the boolean value either true or false. So inside this, if it will be true, it means that we have no error. So it means that successfully we have inserted data, else we have some error. So echo, let's say error, and it should be connection, and let's say error. So successfully we have done that. We have written our query and we are going to execute and insert the data. So for that we have passed this variable inside this query method, and finally it will return the boolean value. So we are checking about the type and the value. So for that we have used triple equal to. It means it will check type as well as about the value. So if it will be true, it means that we have successfully inserted data. So save all these changes, back to browser, reload this page. Now as we can see that we have successfully inserted our data. Back to table, reload this page, and if we go at the top, now as we can see that we have inserted our data successfully inside this table. And also if we want to get about the last inserted ID what we had seen inside last video, actually we can do inside this. Let's say that we are going to insert this time the value is something like this. So let's go here and let's say metabox tutorial, and this should be, if I write metabox@gmail.com, and the price something 1000. Let's say that this time we want about the last inserted ID from our table. So it should be connection, and here we have to write insert underscore ID. So if I save all these changes, back to browser, reload this page. Now as we can see that we have successfully inserted our data inside this truth table at position 6, and the sixth ID here is returned by the, as we can see here. If suppose we have any error at the time of insertion, then this else block will be executed. So how can we check? So let's say that we have called books1 is the table, and we are going to insert that, and as we know that books1 table does not exist in our database, so we can find this scenario that else block will be executed. Back to browser, reload this page. Now as we can see that error, this is the message actually we have concatenated, and we have error called learn coordinator. This is our database, books1 does not exist. So as we have seen about this if block, else, as well as this else block, so we have seen about select statement as well as insert statement. So if I make comment of these lines, and next we are going to learn about that how can we update our data. So this is the simple what we have done with the insert query. So update data, we have to write our update query, and let's say that update table name. So we have called books set, and let's say book name equal to something test@gmail.com. sorry, it's test book, and where ID we have, let's say 5. So what it will do, it will update the book name where it will get the ID equal to 5. Now we are going to execute that. So let's say if connection, let's say query, and inside this we're going to pass, let's say update query equal to true, let's say echo updated data successfully, else echo connection, and let's say we have some error. So back to our browser, reload this page. Successfully we have updated our data. Back to table, reload this page. Now inside this table, the data, as we can see that on the ID number 5, we have successfully updated our book name. So in the same way, for the delete operation, if I back to editor and again comment these lines, because these lines for our update section, and let's say delete data. Now here let's say delete query equal to, let's say delete from table name we have called books, where I'm to pass ID, let's say equal to 6. Now we are going to delete the book which has ID equal to 6. Now let's say if connection query, inside this we are going to pass our delete query variable, and if it will return the true value with the same type, else we have errors. So echo, let's say error, and we have the error message something called connection and error, and inside this if block, let's say echo deleted successfully. Now if I save all these changes, back to browser, reload this page, we have deleted our data. Back to our table, reload this table. Now inside this table, the ID 6 has been deleted now. So successfully guys, by the help of this video session, actually we understood about the executions of MySQLi using object-oriented approach. In the first way, we have seen that how can we make connection using our connection details in object-oriented approach. So successfully we have made an object. By the help of that object, we have checked that if we have some error in our connection details. So for that, we have used two properties of this object, like connect underscore error no and connect underscore error. These are the two objects basically defined inside this class. After checking the connection status, if we have successfully connected, so the same procedure we have to repeat for the insert, update, delete as well as for the select operation. Only we have to call a query method. Inside that we have to pass our query variable, and that query variable basically contains the query something like for delete, update, insert and any of the operation. In the moment of execution of this query, let's say that we have some error inside this query, so finally it will execute inside this else block, and we are going to use one more property inside our MySQLi class, and this is something known as error property. So by the help of this object, we have successfully called that. Now all the things we have repeated, as we can see, the same for the insert, same for the update, all we have done now. And finally, if suppose we want to fetch all the data from our table, so we have to write a query and we have to pass inside this query method. In the same way, if I make uncomment of these lines for a moment, inside this we have executed and store all the data inside this variable. Finally we have to iterate a loop over that result set. So for that we have three available methods inside our MySQLi class, and this is something called fetch array, fetch associative and fetch object. Something called fetch underscore array, we have called fetch underscore assoc and fetch underscore object. These are the three available methods of MySQLi class. Now after executing all these things, if we want to close the class connection what we have made inside this file, anywhere. If we want to open your connection, the best idea and the best practice for the best developer to close the connection after using it. And also free result means in the last video we had seen about MySQLi free result to actually free all the variables where we had stored all the data set. So inside this object oriented, if we want to use or close the connections, for that we are going to use connection and the close method. So finally we have done all the required things inside this object oriented MySQLi tutorial. If I back to browser, reload this page, now as we can see that we have all the data, but this is deleted successfully as we are getting because we have the delete query. It's uncomment this time. So if I comment and back to browser, now we have only our selected data. So by going through our video number 1 and the video number 2, actually we have completed about the MySQLi tutorial using procedural way and object oriented way. So inside this video session guys, if you went out, then please drop your comment. I will give my reply as soon as possible. So for this video session guys, thank you for watching and have a great day.